Anne Speed. I was born in Paris, lived most of my childhood in France, and things changed after I met Anthony.
And I'm Anthony Speed. I was born in London with a South African father and an English mother, so my childhood was split pretty evenly between the two countries until I was back in England and met Anne in France in 1974. We had decided we liked travel, we'd enjoyed travel together, and we set off around the world in 1982. We travelled across Europe, down through Egypt, Sudan, East Africa, down to South Africa. And as we arrived there with only $50 left, that was the end of our round the world trip, and we lived in Cape Town for 2 years before we decided we wanted to move on from South Africa and we started looking for a new home. We looked at Canada, Alaska, and we travelled those areas, and then we went to look at Australia.
One evening I caught up with a friend of mine. We had coffee and we were talking about our next travels. And I mentioned that we had thought of going hiking in Bhutan. This friend said, "Oh, I know friends who went on bikes to Bhutan." Anthony was away at the time, so I came home, did some research, found this organised trip on motorcycles to Bhutan. So that was our first big trip on motorbikes since we'd ridden in Cape Town like 25 years before. So that started our adventure on motorcycles again in 2009.
But somehow it's turned into a round the world trip, and we decided that we wanted to see a couple of particular areas, which was part of the old Silk Route through the Stans, and Iran were two places that were our priorities for this trip, and luckily we were able to achieve both of those, and so able to spend two and a half months in that region. Came through Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and down into Iran, and that's where we spent just about a month, which was the maximum our visa allowed us, and we still didn't have enough time to see and do everything that we wanted to in Iran because of all the people that we met there.
We came through, we rode for a few hours and camped. That was our first night in Iran, and it was just fantastic. Then we went along the north coast and spent our first night in a hotel in Minudasht before catching up with our first friend in Bishar.
No, not a roundabout in Iran. but would you believe traffic lights? This is another in our series on educating you on traffic conditions in this region.
So we caught up with Afroos whom I'd met in Brisbane. She was one of the many Iranians I met in Brisbane through giving a course, and all Iranians were so friendly and welcoming and said, please come and visit my country, I'll help you, I'll introduce you to people, and so glad we did. People would look in amazement and seeing a woman. So for me, the only thing I had to be aware of is to make sure I covered my head. So I wore a scarf around my neck. As soon as I took my helmet off, I put the scarf on. That was fine. But there's a place just before we got to Minudasht, we stopped for a reason. People came over to the bikes and had a look, and this woman came and was really interested to see a woman on the bike. And I asked her if she wanted to sit on the bike. And she said, really? So she sat on the bike. And as she got off, she ran up to me, threw her arms around me and said, I love you.
We did stop at one of the ski resorts,
yes.
But being summer, so we'd come down through the mountains. So we ran along the lake and then turned down.
Karaj. We went to Karaj. 3 nights. We spent our 40th anniversary of when we met there. And this friend of a friend of a friend, Sorab, had decided he was going to treat us for our 40th anniversary.
We then took on the traffic in Tehran on our motorbike, so that was an interesting experience for us. So we spent about 3 more days in Tehran with another friend who I'd met in Brisbane. Spent 3 days in her apartment. She showed us around Tehran. It was wonderful actually meeting Saba and her family and to see how Iranian family works. It's interesting because the people in Iran were so friendly towards us. They would wave. Every single car that went by would wave. Then they'd slow down. Then we overtake them again. Then they would overtake again, but now with their cameras. So they'd come really, really close to us. After Tehran, we went to Isfahan,
Yazd first, yeah, which was beautiful, very interesting. We enjoyed watching the bread making there, which was fascinating, because we'd seen the big bread and the holes and we didn't know how that was made. So.
We didn't end up buying anything there because they kept giving us, every time we passed, they'd give us free bread. So they'd recognise us and go, oh, try some more of our bread. So we never had to buy any bread.
Isfahan. Again, we stayed with friends of friends of friends. Absolutely incredibly welcoming, incredibly welcoming. Very welcoming. We stayed in their house. This friend and her brother took us around Isfahan for a few days, and the girlfriend came along, the niece came along, their friends came to meet us. We went to the aunt's place for Osh, is that meal? Osh. So I think we spent 3 nights.
3 nights there.
3 nights there again. Every time we spent time in people's homes, it was like, why don't you stay longer?
Isfahan, we headed towards Bandar Abbas. I think we were 3 days in Bandar Abbas because we had to organise the shipping, so get the tickets, work out what we needed to do with the customs process through the port.
We were in one of the customs buildings, obviously looking lost because we didn't know which counter. It was a very, very big area. So we went to one counter and we're starting to deal with people behind the counter for the paperwork to ship the bikes. And this gentleman, Reza, saw us and spotted us as obviously, tourists that needed help. And he took us under his wing and we ended up spending the whole day with him. And then he
went out to coffee in the evening with his wife. They took us on a tour of the town at night.
I would say that the Iranian people are the most welcoming people. They welcomed us into their home and we couldn't do anything to even show our appreciation. It's the most welcoming.
And there were people that didn't know us. Many of them were people that were friends of friends of friends who said, yes, I will
take them in.
I will take them in.
We had friends of friends who would take time off to spend time with us. They didn't know us, had never met us, didn't know anything about us. They took time off to spend with us, to show us around because they're proud of their country and wanted to show us as much as possible. Just could not think of any more that anybody could have done for us.